Alright guys, hello and welcome to episode 2 of our driver career mode here in F123. I do apologize for the audio latency in the last episode. I tried to adjust my audio in OBS and I'm hoping that'll fix it. After this intro, we're going to go ahead and go into our audio in-game and kind of bump that down a little bit, see what we can do about improving it. So, yeah, just to recap about the last race, the red flag, pretty much gave us a chance to jump up in the positions, and we managed to defend decently and finish in P7 to end out our race in Bahrain against the Ferraris and the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton being able to get past us there on lap 19. But P7 start for the start of the season is okay. I know I'm a little bit more familiar of Bahrain, but as we come into the race this weekend here in Saudi Arabia, that is a completely different story. It is a faster paced track. I have a lot more downforce on a setup ready to go for this weekend, and I'm just hoping that my practice sessions and qualifying are good enough to get us at least into the Q2, top 10 to 15, compared to the first race. And it doesn't look like we have any rain coming in for the weekend, so that also helps us out. We did have a front downforce upgrade come in for Bahrain, and we are still waiting for that rear downforce upgrade to come in, as we don't have any control over our upgrades. But yeah, we're still sitting in the middle of the field between Alfa Romeo and Alpine here as we come into race number 2. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and knock out our practice, and then we'll see you guys for qualifying. Alright, so here we are with our second qualifying as we get out onto the track here with our soft compound tires, coming around this first corner very well onto the main straight of the track. And after practice, we're feeling a little comfortable coming into this qualifying. Not sure what to expect when it comes to lap times against other people as we come around this first few corners, knowing that we need to be extra careful on the gas pedal, that way we don't slam ourselves into the wall. Coming towards the end of our first qualifying lap, we're coming around this last corner. We're around a 125 here, and hitting the DRS, we actually did get some front wing damage, so that's no big deal. It is our first run, so we're not too worried about that. Currently P7 in the first half of qualifying, as we come back out for a second lap towards the end of the lap, about 7/10, 8/10 faster or so. Towards the second here as we come around the corner with our braking point, and just barely over a second difference, pulling us up to 11th, making us having a lot more confidence coming into Q2 as we're coming around for our first lap. About a 125, 126, around the same area, as we do have the pass of, I believe, Magnussen behind us. I could be wrong. It was Hulkenberg there behind us as we set up a 134.8. And then towards the end of that qualifying session, we come back around. We're currently P11 for qualifying, but we are a second up as we did use scrub tires and major contact into the wall, damaging that front wing, and we do lose about half a second, 6/10 of a second here. 0.4 off of the pace, and P9 into qualifying 3. And as we're coming around for qualifying 3, we set our first lap time. Still coming around the same corner, about a 124, 125. Avoiding contact with a wall this time, as the McLaren of, I believe, Lando Norris goes in right in front of us, setting a 134.7. So we're around the same area all around. And as we're coming through Sector 1 for a second lap attempt, we're sitting in P10 in this top 10 shootout. We lose the back end a little bit here with a little bit of oversteer. And riding these curves a little bit too much as we're coming out a little bit over here and we end up slamming into the wall, losing our left rear tire. So we're going to be DNFing here in Q3, starting in P10. So here's the replay of us slamming into the wall here. And very unfortunate that we could not have improved our time, but we will have to wait and see what we can do in the main event.
We're all ready for tomorrow's race, but before we begin, let's have a quick look at those who'll be fronting the grid. Perez, Verstappen, and George Russell. With qualifying complete, all that remains now is the main event. We'll be live and uninterrupted for the Grand Prix tomorrow, so make sure you join us then. We've got fast sweeping corners under the lights and 20 racers all ready to write their name into the quickly growing history of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So let's take a look at the topographical map of the Jeddah Street Circuit. As you can see, a number of challenging corners for the drivers to master here. We'll see just how much the teams have benefited from their time spent in practice this weekend. And like many street circuits, this track has the potential to punish drivers that get it wrong. Let's hope we avoid any safety cars today. It's time to take a look at our starting grid for today's race. Max Verstappen put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position, just ahead of George Russell, who starts this event from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Fernando Alonso, Leclerc, Stroll, Hamilton, Norris, Hülkenberg, Johnson, Ocon, Perez, Zhou, Oscar Piastri, Magnussen, Sainz, Gasly, Tsunoda, Bottas, Sargent, and Nick de Vries. With preparations almost complete, let's head down to the track. And a warm welcome, of course, to my co-commentator here today, someone of tremendous experience and insight. It's the man himself, Anthony Davidson. Now, can I get your take on Max Verstappen?
Well, it was a really impressive lap in qualifying to get pole position, but are they going to be able to hold on to the lead into the first corner with so many quick starters around them? Besides that, of course, any kind of turn one incident could completely turn the race on its head. Let's keep our fingers crossed everyone can get through in one piece.
After the points finished last race, let's aim to keep that momentum going.
Alright, so we're still trying to figure out why the game is still having stuttering issues. But P9 start, I could have swore we had P10 as a start with the DNF there in Q3. And I'm really hoping that there in Sector 1 doesn't really cause us any issues. Just hoping that we can stay off the walls throughout this race. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and go through our race strategy and get right to the race.
Superb parking there, mate. Let's make sure we get the edge on the surrounding drivers as the lights go out. Keep an eye on the lights.
So here we are. 5 red lights here in Saudi Arabia, and we are off. Myself and the Haas of, I believe, Magnussen off to an okay start, but we were better, a 3 wide. There, I believe, with the McLaren, the Aston Martin, and the Mercedes that's up ahead of them. As we slot up and kind of push the Ferrari out of place as we take our time as best as we can in Sector 1 without losing another position here. The Aston Martin, I believe, Lance Stroll in front of us as the Red Bull of Sergio Perez tries to make a move on us. and the Ferrari closing in behind them. And I was correct. Perez, Leclerc, Hulkenberg, as Verstappen in P3, about 2/10 behind Russell and Alonso, rounding out our top three as we're coming into sector 2 here, and we're losing a lot of time there with Lance Stroll, and you can see Sergio Perez gaining on us, staying within that 3/10 or less interval as the Ferrari tries to make a move on Perez here. And we could see up above that Verstappen takes P2 from Russell. So we're coming into sector 3 here, and Perez dropping from about 5/10 down to 4/10 and closing in. And Leclerc moving in as well as he's moving on the inside. You can see the Ferrari and Haas side by side there in the last turn of this lap as we're rounding out the end of lap 1 and holding our position in P6 about 3.1 seconds behind the top 5. And yeah, so we're holding our position well. And Perez still within that half-second window behind us as some other position changes here. I'm not sure if anybody went in early for damage, but our teammate of Logan Sargent is still sitting in P19 as we're coming through Sector 1 on lap 2, and Perez takes advantage of our mistake here and takes P6 from us as Verstappen slots up into P1 ahead of Alonso up there in the top 3. Separation about 0.5 of a second between those three as coming back through sector 2, and you could just see how much faster the Red Bull of Perez is compared to us in the Williams. And Charles Leclerc actually catching up to us as well, and he's finally able to make his move here in sector 3 on lap 3 with DRS as we are a little bit wide, and Leclerc making that move up to P7, knocking us back to P8 with Piastri and Ocon rounding out the top 10 coming up behind us. And we try to stay in the toe of Leclerc here coming out of the end of lap 3, and we try to make a move on the outside here, and we outbrake him pretty much. He brakes early and we take that turn wide, try to hold that position against him. And side by side coming into sector 1, and the McLaren of Piastri coming ahead of Ocon, and felt like a very good momentum from them as we're going a little bit oversteery here in sector 1, trying to take our time. Leclerc capitalizing on this, and within 0.2 of a second here now as we're coming over these curves trying not to bottom out. You can see Leclerc making a move there on the outside as we hold the inside line, trying to avoid contact here as we give way to Leclerc, giving him P7, and that's basically how it's going to be here on lap 4 as we try to defend against Piastri and Ocon as they are also within 0.2 of a second of each other. And end of lap 4, now we have Piastri and Ocon with DRS catching up to us here. You can see Piastri moving on the inside, how much distance there was between us and Leclerc, just by about a lap's distance, as we hold off Piastri just a little bit longer here as we're coming into sector 1. Basically holding up a lot of traffic here with our pace of the Williams, and trying to close that gap as best as possible between us and Leclerc to try to stay in the fight for points, as Piastri and Ocon are not that far behind us as we're coming out of sector 1 into sector 2. You can see Piastri trying to make a dive bomb move with those soft tires on the inside. We give him the space here, so we're side by side. A little bit of contact from Piastri as Ocon just amazingly makes a move on the outside there as we're fighting for position, and Ocon making a double position overtake as we're the unlucky ones taking that 2 position loss and being back in top 10. So Lewis Hamilton here on lap 6 actually is next up to be making a move on us, as we learned that the pace on this car mixed with the track choice didn't really help us out a lot, especially with how qualifying went. I basically had to trust my instincts on the pace and hitting my marks when it comes to braking zones and getting on that throttle coming out of those turns. As we're sitting in P11, and it's only lap 6, as we now have about a 1.5 gap between us and Hamilton, and Gasly sitting there within DRS behind us, with Sainz, Hulkenberg, and Bottas all about within a second behind Gasly as well, as we're coming into Sector 3, and Gasly's basically going to be able to make the same opportunity that some of the other guys have been able to do. So Gasly pushes us to the outside and making that move on the inside, and we try to take it back, but there is contact between us and Sainz. Nothing too major, not really anything. I did check the damage here. We try to take the position back here at the end of lap 8 on Gasly. We end up doing so, getting back up into P10, but this is the first iteration of pit stops. So you can see Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri, Bottas, Tsunoda, Magnussen all coming in for their first pit stops, and it's lap 9 of 18, so we're about halfway through this race. As we are on the mediums, a lot of those guys are on the softs. So Sainz ended up coming in as well. But end of lap 10 here, we have George Russell, which I thought he was yet to come in, but he ended up coming in on the previous lap. So we ended up defending him and sacrificing his time against Leclerc and Hamilton as we come in for our set of hard tires. And once again, I do want to apologize about the audio here, as we're pulling into our pit stop. We're going to be losing a lot of positions here, but as we're coming out of the pits, there was an audio issue, so we are coming out. We ended up coming out in P15 behind Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon up there in P11. So we're basically right back where we would have qualified if we didn't make it into Q3. But yeah, trying to close that gap between us and Gasly now. As you can see, Hulkenberg, Zhou, and Magnussen there fighting for position, as Hulkenberg manages to make a move on us coming out of Sector 1. And Zhou Guanyu is going to be able to make a similar situation out of it, as we lose a little bit of grip here. But we do manage to hold him off there for a little bit on lap 12. Is when he was actually able to make that move on the inside, about the same area that we lost traction, as trying to get these hard compound tires warmed up here, as Magnussen about 0.2 of a second behind us now, as we're running in P17. Moving on towards the end of lap 12 now, and we're still within range of Guanyu Zhou, as we make a move on the outside, and you can see how Magnussen's momentum is kind of catching up to us. He's still within that second range between us, and now pretty much at this point I have to try and defend against Zhou Guanyu and close that gap between us and Hulkenberg in P15, as we're coming through Sector 1, trying to stay as safe as possible, not hitting those walls, and not overdoing it on the outs of these corners, and not going over these curbs, because a lot of these curbs are not painted, and if we do go over them too far, we'll end up bottoming out, and we will lose a lot of time, as Verstappen and Perez pretty much at this point are 1-2 with Alonso in P3. But we are going to Sergio Perez here, as he is starting lap 16, I believe, coming down this last straight with a DRS zone. Big gap between him, Alonso, and Verstappen, as he ends up going up in smoke here and having to pull off on the entrance of turn 1. So a Sector 1 yellow flag, as we see Alonso coming through there. And this yellow flag basically gives us an opportunity to catch up to Ocon, as we're about a second and a half behind him, and everybody having to close up. But by the time we got down here, the yellow flag was lifted, and they had already removed Perez's car. but we are now within the second range of Ocon. And we're finally able to try to make a move here. Towards the end of lap 17, we brake late and take this corner a little bit wider than usual, but we do stay within Ocon's toe. Using that DRS here, moving him to the inside, making our move on the outside. As we're rounding up P14, coming through Sector 1. And basically at this point of the race, these hard compound tires, they basically feel like medium compound tires, and you have to be very extra careful with them, especially with this hard track. I had to let off the gas a lot sooner than I would have liked to because of these braking zones, but we do end up finishing in P14
All right,
for
race
this
over.
race.
Take care of the car on the way in.
A sterling effort from the team and a magnificent drive to secure victory here at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. What do you think it was today, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition?
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that, you can capitalize on other people's errors without making many of your own. And that's an approach that can push you a long way up the field.
Here come today's winners. The team at Red Bull have done a phenomenal job recently, and it's clear to see that they've put in the work, and they should be so proud of the victory they've secured here. Let's have a quick look at how the driver's standings have changed. That's a positive result for George Russell, who further solidifies his position at the top of the standings. Now, let's discuss, Ant. Who would you say is a contender for driver of the day?
Max Verstappen seemed to just effortlessly weave through the other drivers today without a care in the world. He was definitely my driver of choice.
Let's move on to the constructors. Mercedes continue to extend their lead. And with that, we wrap up another weekend of motorsport action. But with more races lined up, be sure to join us when we come back with more Formula One.
All right, yeah, so pretty rough race here as we ended in P14. We started at P9, so that's 5 positions that we lost there. Very different compared to what it was like on qualifying. I know we had the third qualifying and out because we went in the wall in Sector 1, and as you guys were able to see, we had a lot of trouble there in Sector 1 during this race. The mediums felt like they didn't have enough traction there, even with the high downforce setup. But yeah, knowing Bahrain a lot more than Saudi Arabia, I do a lot better on that track on a higher difficulty than I did here. So that definitely proves it, especially with the way I'm doing it is because I have no control over my upgrades or anything like that. So I'm just specifically driving the car. So these higher paced street circuits, we're gonna see really how the car can perform under my control with what minimal upgrades that we can get. Logan Sargent starting and finishing in P19, and DNF going to Sergio Perez in the Red Bull this time compared to last race. But yeah, so that's about it. So we'll see you guys in the next episode.